Every NFL team prepares for a war on Sundays, a brutal physical clash against a sworn enemy. But the most destructive wars are not the ones fought on the field. They are the ones fought within the walls of a team's own facility. A silent, bitter civil war is raging in Cleveland, a conflict that has nothing to do with an upcoming opponent and everything to do with a franchise at war with itself. It's a battle for the soul of the Cleveland Browns, pitting the brilliant, undeniable light of a future they never expected against the stubborn, suffocating darkness of a present that refuses to let go. At the center of this storm is one electrifying rookie quarterback and the coach whose ego may be about to burn the entire franchise to the ground. It all began with a single preseason game, a performance so captivating it should have been the start of a new era. Shedeur Sanders, the fifth-round rookie, was given the keys to the offense with a third-string offensive line and receivers who were fighting for their NFL lives. The expectations were non-existent. The goal was simple: don't get hurt. But from his very first snap, Sanders operated on a different plane of existence. It wasn't just a performance, it was a declaration. He moved with an economy of motion, a preternatural calm that belied his age. There was no panic, no happy feet in the pocket. When the first read wasn't there, his eyes fluidly scanned to the second, then the third, with the methodical rhythm of a seasoned veteran. He threw with anticipation, placing the ball not where his receivers were, but where they were going to be. The offense, which had looked clunky and disjointed just moments before, suddenly found its pulse. The huddle grew quieter, more focused. He commanded respect not by yelling, but with the quiet confidence that radiated from his every action. It was more than just good quarterback play. It was leadership, raw and undeniable. Fans in the stands, who had been conditioned by decades of disappointment to expect the worst, found themselves leaning forward, a dangerous seed of hope beginning to sprout. This was real. That on-field brilliance should have been met with celebration in the front office. Instead, it was met with a bucket of ice water, thrown directly in the face of the entire fan base by head coach Kevin Stefanski. In the post-game press conference, the air still thick with the excitement of his rookie's debut, Stefanski stepped to the podium. The questions came fast and furious, all of them about the kid who had just stolen the show. This was his moment to validate what every single person had just witnessed, to embrace the gift that had fallen into his lap. Instead, he shrugged. He offered bland, generic coach speak about needing to look at the tape and areas for improvement. Then, when pressed about Sanders' role moving forward, he delivered the line that would ignite a firestorm. He essentially dismissed the performance, stating that Sanders wasn't part of the team's immediate long-term plan. Let that sink in. A rookie quarterback walks in, performs with a level of poise and skill the franchise hasn't seen in years, and his own head coach publicly declares him irrelevant. It wasn't just tone deaf, it was a cold, calculated act of political sabotage, a message sent to the player, the locker room, and the world. This is my team, and you are not part of my narrative. In most cities, such a comment might cause a ripple of confusion. In Cleveland, it caused a tidal wave of pure rage. Because in Cleveland, hope is a precious and fragile commodity, earned through decades of suffering. The fans have endured a torturous carousel of failed quarterbacks, a seemingly endless cycle of botched draft picks and broken promises. They have lived through rebuild after rebuild, clinging to the slimmest of possibilities, only to have their hearts broken time and time again. They know dysfunction when they see it, and they recognize the stench of it immediately in Stefanski's words. The reaction was not just swift, it was visceral. Hashtags demanding the coach's firing trended nationally. Videos of fans burning their jerseys in disgust flooded social media. But the most telling feedback came not from a keyboard, but from the stands at the team's next open practice. The moment Stefanski walked onto the field, a chorus of boos rained down, a raw, real-time verdict delivered from the city's very heartbeat. The fans were sending their own message back to the front office: "We've been through enough. We finally have something real, and we will not let you take it away from us." But the most dangerous fires don't burn in the stands. They smolder in the locker room. There are unspoken codes in the NFL, sacred trust between players and coaches. The most fundamental of these is the idea of meritocracy. The best players play. When a coach publicly undermines a player who has performed, who has earned the respect of his teammates, He shatters that trust. According to sources inside the facility, the reaction among the players to Stefanski's comments ranged from bewilderment to outright fury. These were the men who had seen what Sanders was doing every single day in practice. They saw his work ethic, his relentless film study, his ability to make those around him better. They saw the way the offense clicked when he was under center, the way he could make something out of nothing when a play broke down. For them, Stefanski's dismissal wasn't just a bad coaching decision. It was a personal betrayal. It told them that performance doesn't matter, that politics and ego take precedence over winning. It created a fracture, a deep and dangerous chasm between the players who trusted what they saw on the field and a coach who was clearly operating from a different, more cynical playbook. The locker room was no longer a unified force. It was a collection of factions, whispering in corners, wondering who the coach would turn on next. Amid this swirling vortex of chaos, Shedeur Sanders remained the calmest man in the building. He had been through the crucible of pressure his entire life, from being the son of a legend to being the face of a college football revolution. He didn't lash out. There were no cryptic tweets, no sideline tantrums, no anonymous leaks to the media trashing his coach. He continued to show up early, stay late, and do his job, but that quiet professionalism hid a calculated resolve. Behind the scenes, he made a decision that was both shocking and completely logical. He formally requested a trade. This wasn't a demand born of ego or frustration. It was the professional response of a player who understood his own value and recognized that he was in an unwinnable situation. How else do you respond when your own head coach publicly exiles you after you've done everything right? He had succeeded too much, too soon, and in doing so, he had inadvertently threatened the established order. His trade request was not a white flag of surrender. It was an ultimatum. It was a quiet, dignified declaration. If you will not bet on me, then let me go to a place that will. And as Cleveland's front office scrambled to contain the disaster of their own making, the unmistakable sound of vultures circling could be heard from across the league. The NFL is a predatory ecosystem, and other teams could smell blood in the water. Whispers quickly solidified into credible reports. The Los Angeles Rams, led by offensive genius Sean McVay, were more than just interested. They were actively monitoring the situation. The nightmare scenario began to crystallize in the minds of every Browns fan. Imagine Shedeur Sanders, liberated from the dysfunctional politics of Cleveland, placed into McVay's sophisticated quarterback-friendly system. Imagine him throwing passes to Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, protected by a competent offensive line, and guided by a coach who would not just tolerate his talent, but celebrate and amplify it. The thought was sickening. It represented not just the loss of a great player, but the terrifying possibility of watching him become a perennial All-Pro, a Super Bowl champion, somewhere else. This was no longer just an internal team issue. The entire league was now watching, waiting to see if the Browns were foolish enough to hand-deliver a franchise quarterback to one of their competitors. To understand how a situation could escalate this quickly, one must look deeper into the psychology of the man at the center of it, Kevin Stefanski. This wasn't a single misstep in a press conference. It was the culmination of a pattern. This was sabotage, dressed up in the bland language of coach speak. His actions were not driven by a logical football strategy, but by the most corrosive emotions in sports: fear and ego. Fear that a fifth-round rookie he didn't handpick was about to upstage the veterans he had committed to. Fear of a narrative spinning out of his control, with a player becoming bigger than the coach, and an ego that could not allow him to adapt his plan, to admit that maybe, just maybe, something better than he ever expected had just fallen into his lap. This manifested in subtle but destructive ways. Leaked reports from practice described Stefanski as being overly critical of Sanders, nitpicking his minor mistakes while ignoring his highlight reel plays. He was sending a message, not just to Sanders, but to the whole team. I am the one in charge. My plan is the only plan. This wasn't leadership. It was a desperate attempt to maintain control, and in the process, he was actively devaluing his most promising asset. And so, the Cleveland Browns now stand at a terrifying crossroads, on the very brink of self-destruction. The ownership is in panic mode, trapped between a full-scale fan rebellion, a locker room on the verge of mutiny, and a head coach whose pride has backed them into an impossible corner. The options are stark and unforgiving. Do they swallow their pride, publicly walk back their coach's statements, and make a genuine commitment to building around the young star they were gifted? Or do they double down on their mistake, trade Shedeur Sanders for a handful of magic beans, and prove to the world that the same old Browns are not a memory, but a permanent state of being? This is no longer a simple quarterback controversy. It has become a loyalty test, a battle for the very soul of the Cleveland Browns. And as the entire NFL watches, holding its breath, one has to wonder if some organizations are cursed, forever destined to repeat the same tragic history, forever fated to throw away their own future, again and again and again.